or months, she stayed silent, enduring his torment. But the day he went too far, her father, the town's new sheriff, made sure justice was served. The lunchroom at Clearwater High wasn't chaotic, but it was its own kind of battlefield. Social hierarchy dictated everything. Who sat where? Who was invisible? Who mattered? 15-year-old Riley Carter sat alone at the edge of the cafeteria, picking at her turkey sandwich while pretending not to hear the whispers a few tables away. "Why does she always sit alone?" someone muttered. "Maybe because no one wants to be seen with her." Riley wasn't new to this. She had learned early on that she was different. She didn't fit in, and in a place like Clearwater, that meant surviving on the fringes. But not for Jason Ward. He had made it his personal mission to remind Riley every single day that she didn't belong. Jason wasn't just any kid. He was the golden boy. The son of a wealthy businessman. The star athlete. The one teachers adored and parents trusted. The kid who could do no wrong. And for the past month, Riley had been his favorite target. It started small. A bump in the hallway. A shove that knocked her books to the floor. The kind of things people dismissed as nothing. But it never stopped. That day, it was her lunch. She had barely taken a bite when a hand snatched her tray off the table. She looked up. Jason grinned down at her. "What do we have today, Carter?" He lifted her sandwich with exaggerated disgust. "Turkey and cheese? Guess your dad's paycheck doesn't cover real food." Laughter rippled through the table behind him. Riley's fingers curled under the table. Her jaw tightened. But she stayed silent. She always did. Jason leaned in, voice dripping with mock concern. "You know, you should really say thank you," he sneered. "I'm just trying to help you with your diet." Then he tossed the sandwich over his shoulder. It landed on the floor with a soft splat. Riley's stomach twisted. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. She reached down to grab what was left of her lunch, but before she could, a foot came down, smashing the sandwich into the tile. Jason smirked. Oops. Laughter erupted around her. For a moment, the world shrank. Just Riley. The crushed sandwich. The sound of their amusement echoing in her ears. She knew they were all waiting. Waiting to see what she would do. She grabbed her backpack, stood up, and walked away. She pushed past the tables, ignoring the whispers, the snickers, the heat burning behind her eyes. She kept walking. Past the cafeteria doors. Past the lockers. Straight to the girls' bathroom. She locked herself in a stall and sat on the closed lid of the toilet, taking a slow breath. This was nothing new. She would wait for the bell to ring. Slip out. Pretend none of it happened. Because telling someone never worked. Teachers would say, "Just ignore him." The principal would call it a misunderstanding. And tomorrow, it would start again. But Riley didn't know that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow she would fight back. And Jason would push her further than ever before. That night, Riley barely spoke when she got home. She went straight to her room, shutting the door quietly behind her. She wasn't the kind to slam doors. She knew how to disappear. But her father noticed. "Riley." His deep voice carried through the door. "Everything okay?" She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack before dropping it onto the bed. "Yeah. Just tired." A pause. Then a quiet sigh. "Dinner's in an hour." She waited until his footsteps faded before exhaling. Her father had enough to deal with. Moving to a new town. Taking over as sheriff. Cleaning up the mess left behind by the last guy. She wasn't about to add high school drama to his plate. She could handle it. Except, the next day, Jason made sure she couldn't. It started before first period. Riley was pulling books from her locker when something slammed into her back. Hard. She stumbled forward, her forehead nearly hitting the metal. Laughter. She turned. Jason leaned against the lockers, smirking. "My bad, Carter. Didn't see you there." Her fists clenched at her sides. But she said nothing. That was what he wanted. A reaction. By lunchtime, it got worse. A rumor had started. Someone whispered. "Did you hear?" She tried to fight Jason. "No way." "Yeah." Swung on him and everything. Bet she cried after. She stopped in her tracks. Her mouth went dry. Jason sat at his usual table, scrolling through his phone like none of it mattered. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her sweater. This was worse than the shoving. Worse than the stolen lunches. Worse than the trips in the hallway. This was making sure she was alone. And it worked. She sat alone that day. And the next. And the next. By Friday, she thought maybe he was done. Maybe he had moved on. She was wrong. The final bell rang, and Riley walked toward the front doors. Halfway across the parking lot, she heard his voice. "Hey, Carter." She ignored him. Kept walking. A hand grabbed her wrist. She spun around. "Don't touch me." Jason grinned like this was a game. "Relax. Just saying hi." His friends laughed. Riley's pulse pounded. "Leave me alone." Jason leaned in, his voice low. "Or what? You gonna run to Daddy?" Something snapped. Before she knew it, she shoved him. Hard. Jason stumbled back. For the first time, he wasn't smirking. And that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because Jason wasn't used to being embarrassed. And in that moment, he decided to make sure Riley never forgot it. The next morning, Riley woke up to a nightmare. Her phone was flooded with messages. And then she saw it. A picture of her, taken when she shoved Jason. But edited. Her face twisted in rage. Bold red letters across the that she'll snap for real soon. Her stomach twisted. At lunch, she sat alone. By the time school let out, she wanted to disappear. But when she walked through the front door, her father was waiting. And he had his phone in his hand. "Riley." His voice was steady. Too steady. "Sit down." Her heart pounded. I didn't do anything." Her father's expression was unreadable. "I know." His eyes darkened. "But I also know exactly who did." He picked up the phone. Sheriff Carter wasn't a man who yelled. He didn't make threats. When he was angry, he got quiet. And right now, the silence in that room was suffocating. "Principal Lawson," he said into the phone, voice like steel. "We need to talk. Now." And in that moment, Riley knew. Jason Ward had messed with the wrong person. What happened next? Jason learned that power isn't always about who you know. Sometimes, justice comes from the quietest places. And Riley Carter? She never sat alone again.